I stood frozen in my bedroom doorway, staring at the empty spot where my wedding dress should have been hanging. My hands trembled as I tore through the closet, throwing aside hangers and boxes. That's when I heard giggling from down the hall. I followed the sound to Nina's room and pushed open the door. There she was, my sister, twirling in front of her mirror wearing my wedding dress. The white silk caught the afternoon light as she spun, her face beaming with that smirk I knew too well. "Just trying it on," she said casually, like she'd borrowed a sweater. "You're not using it right now anyway." My throat tightened. This wasn't a joke. This was Nina reminding me once again that what was mine could always become hers. I watched her adjust the veil, my veil, and something inside me cracked. Later that night I went back to check the dress's storage box. Tucked beneath the tissue paper was a note in my mother's handwriting, dated 3 months earlier. "Nina asked about the dress again today. She's always loved it." The betrayal wasn't just from Nina. It went deeper than I'd imagined. Growing up with Nina meant always coming second. She was the loud one, the emotional one, the one who got what she wanted because everyone was too tired to say no. I was the responsible sister, the one who cleaned up messes and kept quiet. When Grandma Rose died, she left her vintage jewelry collection behind. Nina cried harder at the funeral, so Mom gave her first pick. Got 3 pieces. Nina got 20. When our parents bought a new car, Nina claimed the old one even though I was older and had my license first. "She needs it more," Dad said. I rode the bus for 2 more years. Every birthday, every holiday, every moment that should have been equal got tilted in her direction. I told myself it didn't matter, that being the mature one was its own reward. But watching her spin in my wedding dress, I realized I'd been fooling myself. The jealousy between us had always been one-sided. She wanted what I had. I just wanted to be seen. My phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. "Olivia, honey, don't be upset," Mom said before I could even speak. "Nina mentioned she might wear your dress for her ceremony. It's not a big deal, right? You'll be married by then anyway." My stomach dropped. Her ceremony. Nina wasn't even engaged. "Mom, she took my dress without asking. That's theft." Mom laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, sweetheart, don't be dramatic. It's just a dress. You know how Nina gets. She's always admired your things. Just a dress." Those 3 words echoed in my head as I hung up. It wasn't just a dress. It was the one thing I'd chosen completely for myself. The one detail of my wedding that felt purely mine. I'd spent months finding it, saved money from my teaching salary to afford it. And now Nina had decided it was hers too. I confronted her the next morning. She was eating cereal at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. "Nina, I need my dress back." She didn't even look up. "Relax, Liv. You're the lucky one. You're getting married." I just wanted to feel special for once. I turned to my parents, desperate for someone to understand. Dad was reading the newspaper at the breakfast table. Mom was pouring coffee. They looked up when I walked in, their faces already forming that familiar expression of mild annoyance. "Can we talk about Nina taking my wedding dress?" asked, keeping my voice steady. Dad folded his newspaper with a sigh. "Olivia, you're overreacting. It's not worth fighting about." Mom nodded in agreement. "Nina's going through a lot right now. She's feeling left behind while you're planning this big wedding. Can't you just share? You've always been the understanding one. The understanding one. The responsible one. The one who didn't make waves." I'd heard these labels my entire life, and suddenly I understood what they really meant. They meant I was supposed to accept less so Nina could have more. "She took something that belongs to me without permission," I said slowly. "How is that me overreacting?" Mom's expression hardened. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know how sensitive Nina is." I left without another word. That evening I told Ethan everything. He was my fiancé, my partner, the person who was supposed to stand by me no matter what. We sat on the couch in his apartment as I explained the dress situation, the years of being overlooked, The way my family always chose Nina's feelings over mine. Ethan listened, nodding occasionally, but his eyes stayed on the TV screen. "So what do you want me to do about it?" he finally asked. The question caught me off guard. "I want you to understand why I'm upset. I want you to support me." He shrugged and reached for the remote. "It's just sibling drama, Liv. Every family has this stuff. Let it go. Don't cause problems over a dress. Let it go." The same words Mom had used. I stared at him, really looked at him, and wondered when he'd stop being on my team. My phone buzzed with a text from Nina. I glanced at the screen, then at Ethan's phone lying face up on the coffee table. A notification flashed across it. A message from Nina. "I'm just making sure she knows how it feels to be ignored." I couldn't sleep that night. The text from Nina to Ethan played on repeat in my mind. They'd been talking about me behind my back. I sat up in bed and grabbed my laptop, my hurt slowly transforming into something sharper, something focused. If Nina wanted to play games, I'd show her what real strategy looked like. I wasn't going to yell or cry or beg anymore. I was going to take back control. The dress wasn't just about fabric and lace anymore. It represented every time I'd been pushed aside, every moment my feelings had been dismissed as less important than Nina's drama. I started planning. Carefully. Methodically. Not out of cruelty but out of necessity. I needed Nina to understand consequences, something she'd never faced because Mom and Dad always cushioned her falls. I researched wedding dress shops in the next town over. I checked my savings account. I made lists and timelines. This wasn't about revenge. This was about finally standing up for myself. Then my phone rang at 2 a.m. It was my cousin Sarah, calling from overseas where she'd been traveling. "Olivia, I just saw Nina's Instagram story. Is she seriously getting married?" I pulled up Nina's Instagram with shaking hands. There it was. A photo of her in my wedding dress, standing next to a makeshift altar in our parents' backyard. The caption read, "Surprise. Sometimes love can't wait." The comments were full of congratulations and heart emojis. People I'd known my whole life were celebrating Nina's surprise wedding, scheduled for the same month as mine. My phone started buzzing with texts from relatives. "Did you know about Nina's wedding? Are you having a double ceremony? How exciting for your family." Nobody asked if I was okay with this. Nobody questioned the timing. Of course they didn't. This was Nina's pattern. When I got accepted to college, she suddenly needed to transfer schools and demanded everyone help her move. When I got my teaching job, she quit hers and moved back home, requiring constant attention during what should have been my celebration. Now she was planning a wedding to upstage mine. The next morning, I walked into the dining room where the family was gathered. Nina sat at the head of the table, glowing with attention, still wearing my dress. "Congratulations on the engagement I didn't know about," I said, my voice flat. Nina looked up with that innocent smile she'd perfected over the years. "Oh, Olivia. I wanted to tell you, but everything happened so fast. Jason proposed last week, and we just decided why wait. Life's too short." Jason was her boyfriend of 3 months. I'd met him twice. He seemed nice enough, but 3 months wasn't enough time to really know someone. This felt rushed, performative, designed specifically to steal my moment. "And the dress?" "Yes." She smoothed the silk over her lap. "Mom said I could borrow it. Since you have yours at the seamstress anyway." I didn't have my dress at the seamstress. That was a lie. But Mom nodded along, and Dad suddenly became very interested in his phone. I turned and walked out, went straight to my car, and drove to the bridal shop 3 towns over. The same shop where I'd originally found my dress. I walked in with my credit card and a plan. "I need an exact copy of a dress," I told the consultant. "Money's no object. I need it in 3 weeks." Nina's surprise wedding was set for a Saturday afternoon in my parents' backyard. She'd planned everything in 2 weeks, which should have been impossible, but Mom had pulled out all the stops. Flowers everywhere, a string quartet, catering from the expensive place downtown. I watched the preparations from my childhood bedroom window, the one I stayed in when I visited. Everything was happening so fast. Part of me wanted to boycott the whole thing, but a bigger part of me needed to see this through. I needed to witness Nina's moment of triumph so I could properly plan my own response. The wedding day arrived warm and sunny. I wore a simple blue dress and sat in the back row. Nina walked down the makeshift aisle in my stolen wedding dress, and I won't lie, it hurt. But I kept my face neutral, my expression pleasant. I was a teacher. I knew how to hide emotions when necessary. The ceremony was short. Jason seemed genuinely happy, which made me feel slightly bad for him. He had no idea he was a prop in Nina's ongoing competition with me. At the reception, I noticed Ethan standing near the bar, looking uncomfortable. He kept glancing at me, then at Nina, then back at his drink. I cornered Ethan by the dessert table. "We need to talk." He set down his plate and followed me to a quiet corner of the yard, away from the celebration. "What's wrong?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "What's wrong?" I repeated slowly. "My sister stole my wedding dress, planned a surprise wedding during our engagement period, and you've been texting with her behind my back. That's what's wrong." He had the decency to look ashamed. "She was asking for advice about the wedding. That's all. That text where she said she wanted me to know what it feels like to be ignored. What was that about?" Ethan's face flushed. "That was taken out of context. She was upset because she felt like you weren't excited for her." I stared at him, this man I'd planned to marry, and realized I barely recognized him. "If you don't start supporting me over my sister, we're done." "I'm serious, Ethan. I can't marry someone who doesn't have my back." He shifted uncomfortably. "Don't be so dramatic. You're blowing this out of proportion." There was that word again. Dramatic. Like my feelings were an inconvenience everyone had to tolerate. A week after Nina's wedding, I got a message from someone I barely knew. Jessica Chen, a girl who'd gone to high school with Nina. We'd never been friends, but we were Facebook connections. "Can we meet for coffee?" her message read. "There's something you should know about your sister." I met her at a small cafe downtown, curiosity overwhelming my caution. Jessica looked nervous, stirring her latte 3 times before speaking. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but after seeing Nina's wedding posts, I felt like you deserved to know the truth." She pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots. Messages from Nina to various people over the past year, including Jessica's sister who worked at the magazine where Nina had briefly interned. The messages revealed a pattern. Nina had been spreading stories about me, saying I was controlling, jealous, trying to sabotage her relationships. She'd told people I was angry about her dating Jason, that I'd called him unsuitable. "Lies. There's more," Jessica said quietly. "Nina's been talking to Ethan for 6 months. They met at your engagement party, and she's been feeding him these stories about how you're difficult, how you don't appreciate him." My hands clenched around my coffee cup. I called an emergency family meeting for Sunday dinner. Mom protested, saying it was too soon after Nina's wedding, but I insisted. "This is important. Everyone needs to be there." They gathered around the dining room table looking annoyed. Dad, Mom, Nina, Jason, and surprisingly Ethan. I told him to come if he wanted any chance of salvaging our relationship. I stood at the head of the table with a folder full of printed screenshots. "I want to show you all something." I laid out the messages one by one. Nina's texts to Jessica's sister, calling me a jealous older sister who couldn't stand seeing her happy. Messages to mutual friends, painting me as controlling and bitter. The texts to Ethan, carefully designed to make him doubt me. Mom's face went pale. Dad actually looked up from his phone. Nina started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not done." From my bag, I pulled out the replica wedding dress I'd commissioned. Perfect white silk, identical to the original in every way. "This is my real wedding dress. The one you've been wearing, Nina. That was supposed to be my backup. I had this one made months ago and kept it at the seamstress." A lie, but a satisfying one. The room erupted. Nina's face turned red as she stood up, knocking her chair backward. "You're lying. That's the dress I've been wearing." I smiled calmly. "No, you've been wearing a copy. I knew something was off when you kept asking Mom about the dress. So I got a second one made and swapped them. You got married in a backup dress, Nina. How does that feel?" Mom looked between us, confused. "But the receipts, the bills, they're all for the first dress." "Because I paid cash for the second one," I continued, building on the fiction. "I wanted to see if you'd actually go through with it. If you'd really steal my dress and use it for your own wedding without caring about my feelings." It wasn't entirely true. I hadn't predicted she'd get married in it. But the effect was perfect. Nina's triumph evaporated as everyone stared at her. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Olivia, we should talk privately." "No," I said firmly. "Everything from now on happens in front of everyone. I'm done with secrets and behind-the-back conversations. You've been letting Nina manipulate you for months." His face confirmed what I already knew. He'd known about the wedding plans early on. Ethan stayed after everyone else left. We sat in the living room, the silence heavy between us. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "Nina told me you were stressed about the wedding, that she was just trying to help by taking some attention off you. I believed her. For 6 months, you believed her over me." He ran his hands through his hair. "She was convincing. And you were busy with work, and I felt left out of the wedding planning. Nina made me feel included. I thought about the hours I'd spent planning, the spreadsheets I'd made, the venue tours I'd invited him to that he'd skipped. I invited you to everything. You said you didn't care about details." "I know. I was stupid." He moved closer, taking my hand. "But I love you, Olivia. I want to marry you. Please don't let Nina ruin what we have." I pulled my hand away. "Nina didn't ruin anything. You did. You chose to believe her lies instead of talking to me. You minimized my feelings every time I tried to tell you what was happening. I'll make it up to you," he promised. "I'll do whatever it takes." I looked at him and felt nothing but exhaustion. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Nina and a certified letter from an attorney. My stomach dropped as I opened it. Nina was trying to change our grandmother's will, claiming I'd manipulated Grandma Rose into leaving me her house. The house I'd inherited 3 years ago after caring for Grandma through her final illness while Nina was too busy to visit. I called my lawyer immediately. Robert Martinez had handled Grandma's estate and knew the whole story. "Don't worry," he said after I explained. "The will is ironclad. Your grandmother was very clear about her wishes, and we have documentation of your caregiving. Nina doesn't have a case. Why would she do this now?" I asked, though I already knew. "She's grasping at anything she can. She probably thought you were bluffing about the dress, and now she's embarrassed. Some people double down when they're caught." I hung up and stared at my apartment walls. This needed to end. Not just for me, but for any future relationship I'd have with my family. I couldn't keep living like this, always waiting for Nina's next move. Ethan showed up at my door that evening with flowers and a handwritten letter. 3 pages of apologies and promises. I didn't read Ethan's letter. I set it on the counter and focused on what I could control, myself. I'd spent too many years waiting for other people to validate my feelings. It was time to build something that belonged only to me. I threw myself into work. My students noticed the change. I was more present, more engaged, less distracted by family drama. I started a tutoring program after school, something I'd wanted to do for years but never had the time. The program took off. Within 3 weeks, I had 20 students signed up. Within 2 months, other teachers were asking to help. The principal called me in for a meeting, and I thought I was in trouble for using school resources. Instead, she offered me a promotion. Assistant principal, starting next semester. More money, more responsibility, more respect. Everything I'd been working toward. I said yes immediately. My career was finally taking off, and it felt like the universe was confirming what I already knew. I didn't need my family's approval. I didn't need Ethan's support. I needed my own strength, and I was finding it. Nina called twice that week. I didn't answer. Mom texted asking me to be the bigger person. I blocked her number. 3 months later, Nina's wedding fell apart in spectacular fashion. Jason's ex-girlfriend had seen the wedding photos on Instagram and decided to speak up. Apparently, Jason had been engaged to someone else just 4 months before proposing to Nina. The ex-girlfriend posted receipts, texts, photos, proof that Jason had been playing both of them. The story went viral in our small town. The Facebook mom groups picked it up. The local newspaper's lifestyle section ran an article about rushed weddings that was clearly about Nina without naming her directly. Everyone was talking. Nina called me crying at midnight. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Olivia, I need you," she sobbed. "Everyone's laughing at me. Mom and Dad won't talk to me. Jason moved out. I have no one." Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction. The bigger part just felt sad. "Why did you do it, Nina? Why did you steal my dress and plan a wedding just to upstage me?" She was quiet for a long time. "Because you have everything. You're smart, you're successful, you're getting married to someone who actually loves you. And I'm just the screw-up sister who everyone tolerates." Nina's confession hung in the air. I sat on my balcony, phone pressed to my ear, listening to her cry. "You're not a screw-up," I said finally. "But you are manipulative. You hurt people to feel better about yourself, and that needs to stop." "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Olivia. Sorry doesn't fix what you did. Sorry doesn't give me back the months of stress and family drama. But it's a start." We talked for an hour. Really talked, maybe for the first time in our adult lives. Nina admitted she'd felt invisible growing up, that getting Mom and Dad's attention meant being dramatic and demanding. My quiet responsibility had made me easy to overlook. "I was jealous of you," she said. "I still am. You figured out how to be happy without needing everyone's attention. I don't know how to do that." "Therapy," I suggested. "Professional help. Not just talking to Mom who enables you or friends who tell you what you want to hear. Real therapy." She promised to look into it. We hung up with something that felt almost like understanding. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a possibility of future peace. My phone rang again immediately. Ethan this time. "I heard about Nina and Jason," Ethan said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Talk. It was actually productive. Silence on his end then. "Can we talk? In person? I've been thinking about everything and I need to say some things." We met at the coffee shop where he'd first asked me out 3 years ago. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered. "I made a huge mistake," he started. "I let Nina manipulate me because it was easier than confronting how checked out I'd been from our relationship. You were planning this wedding, building this life, and I was just showing up. That's not what you deserved." I stirred my tea, waiting. "I went to therapy," he continued. "Individual therapy. I'm working on why I don't speak up when things bother me, why I avoided conflict by siding with Nina. The therapist helped me see I was sabotaging us." "Ethan," I said gently, "I appreciate that you're working on yourself. Really do. But I've realized something. I've spent my whole life accommodating other people's feelings. I don't want a marriage that feels like more of the same." "I've changed," he insisted. Ethan reached across the table, but I pulled my hands back. "I don't want to hurt you," I said carefully. "But I need to choose myself right now. I need to build a life where I'm not constantly wondering if my partner will support me or side with whoever's crying loudest." His eyes filled with tears. "So that's it. We're done. We've been done since you texted with Nina behind my back. We just didn't admit it yet." He nodded slowly, understanding finally settling into his expression. "For what it's worth, I hope you find someone who deserves you. Someone who sees how strong you are." "Thank you," I said and meant it. We finished our coffee in silence, and when we left, we hugged goodbye. Felt like closing a chapter. A painful one, but one that needed to end. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. No wedding to plan. No family drama to manage. No boyfriend who needed convincing that my feelings mattered. Just me, my job, my future. 2 weeks later I got an envelope in the mail. Inside was a check from Nina for the cost of my wedding dress, along with a letter. I'm in therapy. I'm working on being better. This doesn't fix anything, but it's a start. Mom and Nina showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Tuesday evening. I almost didn't answer the door, but something made me pause. Maybe it was time to finally have this conversation. They stood in my doorway looking uncomfortable. Mom held a bakery box. Nina clutched a tissue. "Can we come in?" Asked. I stepped aside and let them enter. We sat in my living room, the space feeling too small for all the tension between us. "We owe you an apology," Mom started. "A real one. Not the kind where we minimize what happened or ask you to be understanding. A real, genuine apology." Nina nodded, her eyes red. "I was awful to you. For years. And Mom enabled me because it was easier than setting boundaries. You always seemed fine," Mom added quietly. "You were so independent, so capable. I thought you didn't need the same attention Nina did. I was wrong. I'd waited years to hear those words. Now that they were here, I felt oddly calm. I wasn't fine. I was lonely. I was hurt. I was angry. But I learned early that expressing those feelings meant being called dramatic or difficult, so I stopped. We talked for hours that night. Really talked. With honesty I didn't know we were capable of. Mom admitted she'd favored Nina because Nina's emotional outbursts scared her. It was easier to give in than to face the drama. Nina confessed she'd known exactly what she was doing, using emotional manipulation to get her way, but hadn't understood the long-term damage it caused. "I'm learning I have anxiety," Nina said. "The therapist thinks a lot of my behavior was trying to control situations because I felt so out of control inside. That doesn't excuse anything, but it helps me understand. And I'm learning to set boundaries," Mom added. "With both of you. Nina doesn't get to dictate family events anymore. And Olivia, you don't have to be the understanding one all the time. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to need support." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Hurt that deep doesn't heal in one conversation. But it was a beginning, and that meant something. They left with promises to keep working on things. I wasn't sure I believed them completely, but I was willing to see what happened. For the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for managing their emotions. That alone felt revolutionary. 6 months later I started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and movies, remembering what it felt like to be pursued by someone who actually listened when I spoke. I matched with a guy named Marcus on a dating app. He was a high school history teacher, divorced with a 10-year-old daughter. Our first date lasted 4 hours. We talked about teaching, about family complications, about learning to rebuild after betrayal. "My ex-wife cheated with my best friend," he told me over dinner. It destroyed my trust for a while. But therapy helped. Now I'm just careful about who I let in. "I get that," I said, and shared the abbreviated version of my story. He didn't minimize it or tell me to let it go. He just listened and said, "That sounds really painful. I'm sorry you went through that." Such simple words, but they meant everything. We took things slow. Months of dates before we became official. He met Nina and my parents at a casual lunch, and when Nina made a passive-aggressive comment about my salad choice, Marcus looked at her and said simply, "That's rude. Olivia can eat whatever she wants." Nina apologized immediately. Boundaries, I realized, were only as strong as your willingness to enforce them. And Marcus enforced them naturally, without drama or lectures. A year after the wedding dress incident, I finally unpacked the dress. Both dresses, actually. The one I'd worn to Nina's wedding and the replica I'd commissioned. I'd kept them in storage, unsure what to do with them. They represented too much pain to donate, too much money to throw away. "What are you going to do with those?" Marcus asked, helping me sort through my storage unit. We were moving in together, combining households, and I was finally clearing out the remnants of my old life. I don't know. Sell them maybe. He held up the silk, examining the detailed beadwork. Or you could do that thing you mentioned. The donation program that turns wedding dresses into burial gowns for babies. I'd forgotten about that program. A non-profit that took wedding dresses and transformed them into tiny gowns for families who lost infants. Free of charge, just donations of dresses and time. That's perfect, I said. We packaged both dresses carefully and shipped them to the non-profit. 2 weeks later I got an email with photos. One dress had been turned into 6 tiny gowns. 6 families would bury their babies with dignity instead of in hospital blankets. That transformation felt more meaningful than any revenge could have been. I'm 32 now, teaching still, but also training new teachers at the district level. Marcus and I got married last fall in a simple ceremony with 20 close friends. I wore a dress I picked out with his daughter, Emma. Nina came to the wedding. So did Mom and Dad. Ethan sent a card with genuine congratulations. But the most important person there was me. The version of myself I'd fought to become. Someone who set boundaries. Who chose her own peace over family harmony. Who understood that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and healing didn't require reconciliation with people who hurt you. Sometimes I think about that moment when I found Nina in my wedding dress. How violated I felt, how small. If I could go back and tell my past self anything, I'd say this. Your worth isn't determined by how much you're willing to sacrifice. True family shows up consistently, not just when it's convenient. And the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or public humiliation. It's building a life so fulfilling that the people who hurt you become irrelevant to your happiness. I got my taste of medicine, but it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't sweet or bitter. It was just clarity. The kind that comes from finally choosing yourself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else.